Hello, everyone. My name is Dave Musial. I'm the Senior VP of Marketing for SPAR Group. I'd like to welcome all of you to this webinar on the need to change the retail labor model in response to the new omnichannel retail environment out there. Today's agenda, we're going to spend about 40 minutes or so discussing some key industry trends and research results. And then on the back end, we'll leave some time for some Q&A. As we proceed, I'd like you to please type any questions you have along the way into the questions pane on the control panel. We'll answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. We also have a couple of polls we'd like you to complete along the way. At the end of the webinar, everyone will be able to download a free copy of the written report, and then tomorrow each of you will receive an email with a link to the recorded webinar. Now I'd like to take a moment to introduce our presenters. Sahir Anand is Vice President of Research and Principal Analyst for EKN, a research firm focused on business and technology insights in the fields of retail, consumer goods, travel, and hospitality. Sahir has more than 15 years' experience as an industry analyst, research leader, and strategist, and he has authored over 150 retail and consumer industry research reports. Jill Blanchard is President and CEO of SPAR, the leading provider of in-store merchandising and other retail service solutions across the globe. She has more than 25 years in the service industry and actually began her career as a statistician. Her mantra, "Stop selling and start solving," defines her focus on providing real, solution-based value to clients. This focus is a big reason why SPAR sponsored this study by EKN. In this webinar, we're going to show you why the existing labor model is upside down. A rapidly changing retail environment, led by the explosion of omnichannel shopping, is creating new in-store challenges. Among these challenges are the increased competition accessible right in the palm of a shopper's hand, inventory and fulfillment challenges, the need for in-store merchandising to be aligned with multiple channels, and a much more demanding consumer with greater expectations for more knowledgeable sales associates and a better shopping experience. All of these challenges are leading to strains on operational effectiveness, management of rising labor costs, and thinning profit margins, which are forcing companies to reevaluate how to increase the efficiency of field and store labor. Jill and Sahir will discuss these challenges and reveal findings from EKN's latest study that identify key issues, establish the biggest needs for a change in the retail labor model, and determine how those needs can best be met. Now I'd like to turn the mic over to Jill, who will briefly set up the situation the retail industry finds itself in.
Great. Thanks, Dave, and welcome everybody to the webinar today. So let me first start by talking about the state of the retail industry. Just coming off the holiday season, I'm sure that all of you saw all the media hype on e-commerce sales, but if you look at the numbers, the facts really speak for themselves, and that physical retail sales has, and it's going to continue to dwarf e-commerce sales. In fact, physical retail sales is poised for $4 trillion in growth over the next 10 years. One of my favorite quotes that I recently heard from Brian Cornell, the CEO of Target, is when he said that e-commerce retailers' idea of innovation is opening up physical stores. And we all saw in the press last week that Amazon looks like they're going to be opening up hundreds of stores. So they might have gotten the message that 80% of consumers prefer to shop in stores. And we do that because we want the entertainment value of shopping, we want the social interaction, and here's the key one, we want the ability to receive the product in hand in that moment. So physical retail is quite viable and it's poised for good growth, but it's a really different world. Omnichannel world of retail is leading to new challenges that are straining our traditional labor structure. Stores today aren't competing just with the stores down the road anymore. They are now competing with what we as consumers can do on our smartphones and online. In fact, about 80% of purchases today are influenced in some way by a digital device. This increase in competition is leading to thinning profit margins, as Dave had talked about in the upfront intro, a greater need for more efficiencies, and an improved engagement with a store's customers. And let's just talk about that last one. The smartphone has really changed all of us as consumers, even as people, even our children. I mean, kids today have access to instant friends and entertainment and an expectation of immediacy to any questions that they may have. The old adage of going to your parents and asking them why the sky is blue is now a question that takes seconds to ask to Siri. And we're no different. We no longer have the patience to walk into a Walmart and try and find toothpicks. We expect in-store personnel to be available and knowledgeable. And similar to our online experience, we want to be entertained when we go to the store. So this means that store associates must act more like a concierge, but most consumers today aren't getting that type of experience. In fact, both consumers and store associates would say that the consumer is usually faster to find information and more knowledgeable about products that they're trying to buy, which is a huge lost opportunity for retailers and manufacturers, because the truth is that most shoppers who don't find a sales associate helpful aren't likely to make that purchase, and conversely, when they do, 92% will buy, and they'll buy more. Another effect of omnichannel retail is the strain on inventory management. While out-of-stocks have improved in some categories and some channels, it still is a giant global opportunity. And consumers today, more than ever, are expecting in-stock inventory. In fact, the number one factor that frustrates the omni shopper today isn't what it's always been, and that's pricing. Now it's inventory. One of the main reasons for going to that store is the immediate gratification of having that product in hand. Add to this the additional strain of stores being used as online order fulfillment centers and pickup points, and we've got a much more challenging inventory management scenario than ever before. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Sahir to talk about the impact on labor that this changing consumer and changing retail world has caused. Sahir.
Thank you, Jill, and thanks everyone for joining. I think it was the National Retail Federation show that our team posed this question to a number of retailers at our advisory council dinner, and then we hosted a breakfast panel with 4 retailers, including Ann Inc. And it was a pretty important question, right? So what is the impact on labor, and will this be the year of the associates in retail? And our prediction, as well as all our data, is citing that this indeed will be the year of the associate, and not only this year, but the next 3 years are pretty critical in terms of how retail is going to evolve, especially the store labor is going to evolve, and how empowered and engaged that associate is going to be with customers. So let's talk about the impact on labor, and picking up from what Jill mentioned, besides the numbers that are very powerful in favor of the store leading the wave of integrated commerce, I think it's important to understand that close to 2/3 of retailers are going to be adding some stores to many stores this year, according to our research. And what's also true is that 8 in 10 retailers are looking to increase online orders that are going to be processed from the store. And that processing means that it's not just placing an order, but having substantial reallocations back into the stores as far as available inventory on hand. So when associates are doing their cycle counts and their out-of-stock walks or in-stock walks, they can ensure that there's inventory not just for the shelf and some in the top stock or the overstock, but also some quantities anywhere from 30 to 50% of on-shelf quantities that are actually allocated towards online inventory. So the reason I bring this up is that the merging and integration of channels is adding a lot of pressure on an already stretched store associate to complete several additional tasks without losing the focus on servicing in-store customers and increasing in-store sales. So that does not go away for the retail associate, and that's why it's so challenging. And firsthand, I've spent a lot of time in stores, managing stores and really doing the day-to-day blocking and tackling. And I can firsthand tell you that what some of you have already experienced is that store associates can be pulled into different directions, especially during busy holiday season, back to school, and that's when there are delays in processing orders, there are delays in fulfillment, and a number of other challenges that come up. So what's really important to think about is three key points. The number one challenge is to figure out how to overcome the growing online order needs in the store and the omnichannel exchange return. So that's number one. Number two, figuring out how to balance task management without increasing too many labor hours or without hampering training and labor availability, right? And in addition to that, retailers across the board in food and in non-food also need to think about the productivity and efficiency expectations, because your number of stores are not decreasing overnight. Yes, some stores are closing, the ones that are not performing. So you have a lot of operational costs to deal with. Therefore, you do not want to impact your profit margin as a result of labor inefficiencies and too many tasks. And obviously, you want to be able to compete in an omni-channel environment, which is, by the way, Jill rightly mentioned Amazon. Amazon is putting pressure on each and every store, each and every retailer to really rack up their category level sales performance and their associate productivity. So let's look at the next slide. And what's really important on the next slide is this notion that the impact on labor is really twofold. What we are seeing in our research is that there is a net effect of all these omni-channel tasks and the operational aspect of the store. And stores have traditionally always been operations focused. There are exceptions where some stores are very, very customer focused, but you've got to have a fine balance. But what's happening right now through our research, what we found is that there is a lopsided effect as it relates to retail labor. In other words, 30% of labor hours are singularly dedicated to customer service and sales, and the bulk of the hours, 70%, are dedicated towards operations. And yet, for retailers, as they say, every year, the top two objectives are sales and customer service. So how do you resort to this? This challenge is critical for everyone to think about, because omni-channel needs are magnifying. Customer expectations have risen, like Jill said. And like all of us know, competition has increased on the high street, as well as close to your neighborhoods, where more and more real estate is being utilized for new retail stores and ATMs and what have you. And yet only 30% of time, with all this wave of new improvements, only 30% of time is spent on sales and customer service. So will such a labor model be truly sustainable, is a question we ask. And in my view, it's not sustainable. In our view, retailers need to agree that their current labor model is not working. In fact, when we surveyed retailers just this past couple of months, 60% have told us, 6 in 10 retailers, as well as consumer goods manufacturers who service retailers, that the current labor model is not working. It's just not working. Now, we'll address this point in the following slides, but before we go there, I'm going to hand it back over to Dave, who has the polling question.
Do you see this upside down labor allocation as a challenge with your business? Again, you can answer yes, no, not applicable. We'll give you about 30 seconds. See how we go. Now, as our poll shows, 45% do, 40% are not applicable. We have many people on the webinar today that come from the service business versus retailers or manufacturers. So in that case, obviously those would not be applicable to them.
So great. I think this is in line with 45% versus 15% and 40% not applicable. So that kind of shows that that we have a trend in line with our research, that even the audience on the webinar today feel that there is a lopsided effect. So in terms of solving this lopsided effect of labor allocation and hourly allocation of labor, what can companies do? And what are retailers and their consumer good partners really doing to address this labor distribution model? Is there a way to change it? Well, there is a way to change it. Both entities, retailers and consumer good partners, need to switch from an operational labor model to a more customer-centric or consumer-centric labor model. And it's not easy, because when you are allocating 1,000 hours a week for a large big box retail stores, there is a chunk, almost 50-60%, that goes straight out for inventory management and merchandising. So when you're looking at both traditional FTE style labor, how do you really address the slight switch towards customer service? Can retailers think about more of the non-traditional way of giving some responsibility to consumer goods companies to come into the stores, help out with merchandising, help out with planogramming, and not just planogramming, but even help out with assisted sales and omni-channel tasks? That's a question that we are posing in our research, and I think it's a very valid question, because if you look around, more and more retailers today are relying on their consumer good partners and third-party companies to come into the stores and help out. It's a question of finding the right balance and the right process, and we'll talk about that in a second. Let's move to the next slide, where we can actually look at what are those key areas where outsourced labor or the help from consumer good companies and third-party companies can help retail stores. So in other words, you have your traditional FTE style full-time labor and part-time labor, which is hired by the store, and then you have the reps coming into the stores, more and more reps who can come into the stores, truly understand the store culture and the fabric of the store, and understand how they can blend in and help out. So areas where outsourced labor is helping out today starts with omnichannel order pickup. So your curbside pickup, it could be buy online pickup in the store, it could be fulfillment, direct drop shipment, and those type of tasks. That's increasingly becoming pretty common out there. Installation and assembly has always been one of the top areas where consumer good companies and third-party companies have been helping retail stores, so that remains important. Seasonal support, very, very important, especially during sales events, back to school, and holiday season, when you need support from companies besides the labor that you carry, the labor cost that you carry. You want some burden to be taken up by consumer good companies and third-party companies. And then in this age of rising consumer expectations, the need for better product demos and in-store experiences. Jill made a very important point. She made a point around, one of the top 3 challenges with in-store labor from a consumer's vantage point is that the store labor is not providing the right level of product knowledge. So product demos and promotions is another area where consumer good companies and third-party companies can really help the retailer take some burden off the associates and help explain the product features, information about the product, nutritional information, other types of information to the customers who can then make an educated purchase. And then finally, merchandising. It's defined in different ways, but the need to merchandise stores to do the right planograms that makes it easier for shoppers to quickly find what they need and then be able to find all the attachments that they need. Very important. I worked at Staples. I know firsthand that it's so important that when you sell a printer or a laptop or another consumer electronics item to a customer, you have to be able to offer the right cartridges, the right amount of paper, the right type of paper, and the right cable. Very important, and that makes into a satisfactory purchase experience. So very important to think about these areas. And as we look at the next slide, it's also important to find out how this evolution is taking place today. In our world of research, we always look at, okay, how are companies trying to seek help from consumer good companies and third-party service providers. So one of the areas that we touch upon is, okay, let's look at it from a retailer standpoint. The top 2 areas is number one is the ability to lower cost. It's cost, and more cost that is being added onto the stores. And if stores want to remain profitable, and for retailers not to close down stores, it's very important to seek that help and be able to outsource some of your tasks, some of the non-core tasks, and be able to negotiate a good price, a good cost model to be able to take that help. Very important from a retailer standpoint for the stores to remain profitable. Secondly, when you have so many omni-channel tasks, I was talking to the head of store operations from Anning, for example. So they've actually introduced a new scheduling model whereby they add some additional hours, but they also take help from some vendors. And similarly, companies like MGM are doing something similar, where you're reaching out and for your vendors to be able to support certain types of omni-channel tasks, whether it's buy online pickup in the store, direct drop shipment, whether it is curbside pickup, what have you. On the CPG side, things are a little bit different. So on the retailer side, it's labor cost, that's the number one driver. On the CPG side, seeking help from other companies to do field operations, they need better scalability because they service a number of retail accounts. And they need somebody who can help them scale and provide the labor coverage, adequate labor coverage. And their number two is actually similar to, the number two reason is similar to retailers' number one reason, which is the need to lower costs. So as they're providing coverage, labor coverage in the field to their retailer friends and the retailer accounts, they have to be able to manage a lower labor cost model. Not easy, and here's why. Let's look at the next slide. It's not easy because companies have to manage a number of tasks, right? We discussed this earlier, and as you can see today, there are certain reasons, strong reasons, why companies outsource aspects like installation and assembly, seasonal labor support. And what our data shows is that we are seeing a lot of strong trends as far as utilization in the areas that are the top four on the screen right now, right? So top four being installation and assembly, labor support for seasonal selling, omni-channel tasks, and in-store audits, both safety audits and other types of audits. Where the trend is going to increase in the next couple of years is areas like product demos, improving associate help, right? In different parts of the store, increasing guided selling, the ability to manage assisted sales environments, both for commissioned and non-commissioned environments, as well as core and non-core merchandising, planogramming. All that is supposed to increase. So what this tells us is that it could have a big impact on that conundrum, the 70-30 conundrum. So when 70% of your labor hours are dedicated towards operations and 30% towards customer service, even if you can move it a few basis points towards customer service, seek help from companies like consumer good companies and your partners, your vendors. If you can seek help from them, you can start to focus more and more on upselling, cross-selling, taking care of the customer, not ignoring the customer, and reducing the friction in the store, reducing the abandonment of sales in the stores. That's very critical. Next slide, I'll make a quick comment on something which is really interesting. And on this particular slide, in fact, I'm also going to bring in Jill to comment. But before Jill comes in, I'll just make a very quick point. The top three concerns with outsourcing. So it's all good. It's all great for researchers, analysts, and service providers to say, hey, you need to outsource and raise that banner. But in which areas should you seek help from consumer good companies, and which areas should you challenge them and challenge the third-party service companies to help you more, right? Is because more and more retail stores often feel that they need better clarity around the schedules of people who visit stores. When I used to be in the stores, I used to also feel the same way, that I didn't have clarity around schedules, right? And other people who manage store operations say the same thing. Things have improved a lot, but there's still more clarity required on automated schedules, and schedules that can be referenced readily. Second point I'll make is the lack of alignment between the retailers and the consumer good companies' brand values. So I'll give you a good example. Let's say if you walk into a store, you have John Smith, who's an associate at a Staples store, and then you have Mary Lou, who's the associate from the consumer goods manufacturer side, and they're wearing different clothes. Obviously, not the same uniform. They have different training aspects that they followed. They're not on the same page. Just imagine the impact on the customer's psyche and their customer's experience. They're not going to relate with both people the same way. And what if John Smith is really busy servicing another customer? Should the other customer who could seek help from Mary Lou, he or she would expect the same type of service, the same type of standard. And when they don't get it, they leave the store disappointed. A teen number of times that's happened in retail. The third and final point, after which I would love for Jill to comment as well, is the lack of ownership and accountability related to outsourced companies. I'll give you a very simple example. At Staples, we used to sell a lot of books in the stores. And oftentimes when the books would sell out, we would have a lag between when the vendor would come and replace the books so that we can buy the books and maps again. They were very popular somehow in our stores at the time. Today, you cannot afford that out of stock scenario. You just cannot afford it because once a customer comes expecting something, they'll go somewhere and they'll order it in a second on their mobile device. So you cannot have that lack of accountability as far as filling the shelves on a timely basis, helping with planograms, helping customers. You have to raise your hand as a consumer goods manufacturer and a third-party company to say, hey, by the way, we can help. And by the way, it's not just in merchandising. We can help you with assisted sales. Jill, would you like to comment on this?
Sure, thank you. So yeah, let me talk to those same 3 points and talk a little bit about some of the ways that outsourced companies can address these concerns. And so I'll start with that first one as well, the lack of clarity around outsourced schedules. I think this really comes down to, the ability to improve this comes down to communications and systems. So it's clear that outsourced labor companies need to work closely both with the retailer and manufacturer customers to plan the programs well in advance, and I'll talk to that a little bit more today as well, and provide an exceptional operations system to manage in-store activity on a real-time basis. The concern on lack of alignment with brand values is something that I have seen as a global trend as well. We're seeing more and more clients looking for closer alignment to their brand. There's always an opportunity for outsourced labor companies to improve their understanding and communication of brand values to their labor forces, and we can do that online training, maybe even a certification that the in-store personnel has to go through before being on site. And I'll also say that it really helps to have the labor company involved in the entire process so that the labor company can pick up on the culture and the values, things that maybe aren't on paper and aren't part of a certification process, and instill those in their workforce on behalf of their clients. And then the third one I'll talk to, which really kind of ties back to brand values, is the lack of ownership and accountability. The right incentive plans, which are really on the rise today, can play an important role here. The right plan can incent for ownership and accountability and reward things like tenure. In this business, the longer that someone is working on a brand, typically speaking, the more ownership they feel towards that brand. And I'll give you an example. I was working in the field last week, and I was working in a store on a category with our people, and as we were walking through the store, we passed another category that we worked on, but we weren't working on it that day, and my people stopped just to touch it and fix it and make sure it was perfect. It took 5 seconds, but it's that anecdotal evidence that they care so much about that category and that brand and that retailer because they've been working on it for quite some time. They simply can't walk past that shelf without just touching it, fixing it, making sure it's perfect, even though it wasn't what we were there to do that day. So it can go a long way. So Sahir, I'll turn it back over to you.
Before I go to the next slide, Sahir, I just want a quick reminder to everyone that if you have questions, please type them into the question pane on the control panel along the way, and then we'll get to those questions at the end. Okay, sorry about that.
No, absolutely. I love that example that Jill gave. It's such a relevant example that when you're in a store and you work with store managers and associates, you, as a consumer goods company rep, third-party rep, you got to be able to do the same actions and blend into the same culture in the store. A great example, Jill. So let's look at one more aspect. As we talk about what are the attributes that retail stores and retailers in store operations and other parts of retail headquarters, what do they look for in outside help, right, when it comes to servicing stores and helping out in stores? It's important to think about three key aspects. If you recall, we spoke about the 70-30 or the 30-70 labor allocation conundrum. One of the ways to solve that, or one of the ways to think about it is, okay, if you want great third-party support and consumer good manufacturer support in the stores, you, as a retailer, want consistent service. Service consistency as it relates to outsourced labor ensures one view of the brand and one view for the customer as it relates to sales, serviceability, and operations. Second point I'll make is the need for retailers, they look at third-party support or consumer goods manufacturer support as a way to provide complete end-to-end business solutions and innovation. In the stores, the next 3 to 5 years, stores are not going to be the same. Stores will reduce in size. They'll become very strong brand-driven showrooms. They will become digitally integrated at a much higher level, and we will see many new customer-friendly technologies being introduced in the store. As all of this happens, you need great partners who can provide you with innovation in the store, and innovation as it relates to customer service and related operations in a balanced way. And the last point I'll make is affordability of services. In the past, when we dealt with vendors and consumer goods brands, traditionally brands have always supported retailers in terms of trade promotions. Another big way they can support retailers with third-party service provider support is providing affordable cost of labor services. The reason I bring this up is that every year there are more basis points that are added to labor cost. Today, labor cost is somewhere in the range of, depending on where, nationally, it's somewhere in the range of $16 to $18, including benefits per hour, FTE. That cost continues to increase. And activity-based costing in the store has to be much smarter. It has to be smarter because there are more omni-channel tasks. There is a lot of pressure that both sides have to deal with. And as you service more and more stores as a consumer goods company, you have to ensure that there is scale and volume advantages for the retailer as well. So there are dependencies on both sides. It's how you manage the activity-based costing and how do you bring in ROI elements so that you can balance that 70-30 conundrum which we've been talking about. So there'll be more discussion on this point and many other points, but I would like to also bring in Jill and for her to share her views on this point, because we've had some conversations about this particular point and other points on this slide. So Jill, I'd like to chime you back in.
Great, thank you. Yes, we have talked quite a bit about all of these points. Let me also first start with consistency of service, because in our business, this is really the biggest thing that we can do to execute successful in-store execution. So there are a number of factors that affect consistency of service, like being an integral part of the planning process, having reasonable lead times, making sure that we're working with our retailers and manufacturer partners to provide clearly articulated task and efficient schedule management. So things like, let's make sure that we're not sending somebody to the store to put up a display and the display isn't there yet for them to put up. Also, really good operations management systems. These can help us identify and address any in-store consistency issues that we may have. And then the last factor that I'll mention that influences consistency of services, because it's the biggest one, is consistency of work. On the business solution side, I was pleased to see this as one of the top responses. I'm a big believer in this as well, in that a third-party provider needs to be more than just a cost-based people provider. A third-party provider has to be able to incubate ideas and innovations with our customers. As Sahir said, it's going to be an entirely different retail environment in 5 to 10 years from now, the same way that today is from 5 and 10 years back. So a third-party labor provider, to really understand the challenges and opportunities of retailers and manufacturers, needs to be talking to them about their situation, to ideate and provide innovative ideas that's going to help everybody survive and thrive in this rapidly changing world. And then on the last part, the affordable cost of services, which Sahir spoke to quite a bit, this is the table stakes for any outsourced labor provider. And yes, it is complicated, and there are many pieces to it, and it's the table stakes. So at this point, I think we're going to have our last poll question, and I'll turn it over to you to conduct that question.
All right, final poll. Do you consider outsourced labor a viable solution to helping you meet your retail or field labor challenges? And we can see the majority of you do, of those that have it be applicable, which is right along with expectations.
Great. Thanks, Dave, and thank you everybody for participating in the polls. It makes it a little less of just a one-way conversation here today. So let me summarize before I hand it over to Dave to conclude. And really, in summary, I think we can look at just one word that we see everywhere, and that is change. So we've got consumer change that's driving a retail change, that's driving a retail labor model change. So let's first summarize on the consumer changing piece. We definitely have big changes in shopping habits. So we now desire a complete, comprehensive, omni-channel shopping experience. It's got to be easy to find products. We need to be able to have access to product knowledgeable sales personnel. On-hand inventory is more important than it's ever been. And we're looking for an entertaining experience. And all of these are driving changes in retail and putting tremendous strain on retailers and manufacturers. So stores now have to accommodate the omni-shopper with things like digital interactions, available and knowledgeable store personnel, entertaining venues, and inventory is now the name of the game over pricing, which has been the name for years and years. And this, in turn, is driving labor model changes. So labor hours are increasing now to handle fulfillment and pickups, inventory management, store remodels, optimized merchandising, and for some retailers, even sort of a customer concierge type of service. So labor is critical for customer engagement and operational efficiency. And retailers and manufacturers need to adapt to these new demands of the omnichannel retail world with new approaches to survive and thrive. And one of those options is the option of outsourced labor. It's a viable path, but as our survey said, outsourced providers have a number of things they have to hit on for this to be a viable path. An outsourced provider has got to drive optimum value, has got to provide business solutions and not just be a labor provider, has to be transparent and provide real-time clarity in scheduling and reporting. We talked a little bit about the brand values, and so they have to be educated in and committed to and get their field educated in and committed to these brand values. And they have to provide superior consistency of service and accountability for their work. So in summary, I'd say an outsourced labor provider needs to work with their brands and retailers to ideate, that's a big one for us, to ideate, plan, and provide solutions to their growing needs and the issues associated with them for all of us to survive and thrive in the new retail world. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave to conclude and open up for questions and answers.
Thank you, Jill. I'd like to thank Jill and Sahir both for presenting the results as well as their insights from the study. And before we start the Q&A, I'm going to do a little housekeeping. So first of all, I just uploaded the written study. Should be in the handouts on in your control panel. So you're free to download that study. The second thing I'd like to do is mention that there will be a follow-up email with a link to the recorded version of the webinar that you'll be getting in the next couple of days. And with that, we have about 15 minutes left. I don't know if we'll be using all that time. Hopefully we'll give you some time back at the end. but I wanted to open it up to questions. So if any of you have any questions, and I notice we have at least a couple of questions so far. So let me feed those off, and we'll see if we can answer. So the first question, this will be for Jill and Sahir. We've been talking about in-store labor and the difference between retail and CPG labor. So the first question we had is, what constitutes CPG labor in-store? What are we talking about when we say CPG labor?
So let me start, and Jill can provide her views on this. Is CPG labor can comprise of several components. One, it relates to the merchandising and operational aspect. Traditionally, reps that come into stores to take care of new planograms, do cut-ins on shippers, on the promo shippers. Could be an end cap, a new end cap that is going to attract customer walk-through traffic. It can also be price changes and product information related changes that you make on the shelf. Another reason that CPG companies visit stores, the reps visit stores, is when you have a new product, to conduct a product demo around that, to make sure that there is proper product demos and installation and assembly of different products in the store. Those are the traditional aspects of how CPG companies have serviced stores. Some of the non-traditional aspects include more dynamic promotions being sent to the stores. That's the job of not just mobile-enabled promotions that CPG companies can help retailers with through their mobile apps, but you can also see CPG companies getting involved with more non-traditional tasks such as assisted selling, being able to guide and motivate customers to try out new products and services, and be able to do sample management in the stores. So these are all non-traditional areas. And then one key component that I want to mention is omnichannel tasks, because that's coming up in our research again and again, that as you start to ship out 100, 200, 300 new orders, online orders from the store, you need help from a pick, pack, ship perspective. You also need help from a buy online, pick up in the store, or in-store delivery of products, and also curbside pickup. These are all areas, click and collect as it's called. These are all areas which are increasingly areas where CPG companies can help, and third-party companies can help retail stores to increase efficiencies, because keep in mind that not all stores are going to have the hours, right? So as you look at your hourly, FTE, full-time, healthcare costs, you look at benefits, and then all the non-full-time or the part-time labor models, and everything is shrinking these days because of so many pressures. You need help from CPG companies to help in omni-channel task completion, and also third-party companies. So those are that's the laundry list, but it's important to list everything out.
Now, let me just jump in and add it and just answer from a different perspective. If the question was about, there were a couple slides where on the left-hand side we had the column entitled the retailer in-store labor, and on the right it was CPG field labor. We were simply trying to distinguish between answers that we got in doing the survey from retailers versus manufacturers. So I wasn't sure if that was maybe what the question meant, so I thought I'd jump in just in case.
Okay. Next question. Jill, this one will be for you. How does SPAR support training of outsourced labor? Is it hands-on, video, webcast? And also, how do you track and monitor the success or failure of that training?
Oh gosh. So first of all, it is both, and then there is more. So there are a number of ways that we provide training to our field personnel that is always coordinated with the retailer or manufacturer client. So it may be a certification process, it may be a video, it may be a webinar. In some cases, it's hands-on. It really depends on what it is that we're doing and for what kind of a client. There are some that will require that kind of training. I'm sorry, give me the back half of that question, Dave, because that was the first half. What was the
How
back
do we
half?
track and monitor the success or failure of that training?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I knew I forgot something. Yes. A few times on the call today, I've mentioned the need for having an operational system that can manage many facets of the entire in-store labor process, and that is one of the pieces of the labor process. And it's really important to have a system that manages that. And so our system can manage whether or not they have viewed the training, passed a certification. A lot of our work, actually I say a lot, almost all of our work requires pictures to be taken that are always quality assured, and so we can see via the pictures and the responses whether or not a new merchandiser, which are the ones that we're typically looking at, understood the training and applied that to field. So there are a number of ways. What's really important, I think, getting it all right. I'll try to sum it up into two pieces. One is to coordinate the training with the client, so it is adhering to what it is that they need to get done in the field, and their culture and values, which I mentioned before too, which really matter. And then the second is having an automated, a systems way to be able to monitor and measure that. I think those are the two most important factors.
All right, and Jill's follow-up sort of to that question. How do you make it a priority to provide third-party labor that assumes ownership of the brand for which they provide service?
So it's how do we make a point?
How do you make it a priority to provide third-party labor that assumes ownership of the brand?
One of the things that I talked about today, and I talk about this to a lot of our customers around the world because it's really I think a global trend, and not just a trend in this country, are incentive programs. And we have seen our clients as well as us together come up with some really creative incentive programs that provide the opportunity for our field to be more closely aligned with that brand. I'll give you an example. It's outside of this country, but we had a client that wanted our field personnel to be close to the brand and close to the products, and so they wanted their babies to be in their diapers and their hair products to be the one that they used, and their shaving products. And so they came up with a way. It's kind of hard to work through a few laws here because it's in a different country, but we came up with a way to be able to provide them with not just samples, but some of these products to be used in their home, so they could get closer to this brand. So I'll go back to your original question and give you the answer with incentive programs can go a long way to get our field people closer aligned with and committed to specific brands as well as retailers. And I'm sorry, I should mention this just a second time because it's a big one, and that's tenure. I mean, so the more consistent work that we have and the longer that we can keep people on brands, the more committed they are to those. Our people really do walk down an aisle in a store and they fix shelves even when they're shopping on weekends because they just can't stop. It's their brand, it's their retailer, it's what they care about and work about on a weekly basis.
Okay. That's all the questions we have. Anybody else have any more questions? All right, so if there aren't any more questions, Jill or Sahir, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I'll just jump in pretty quickly and say thank you on behalf of SPAR for taking the time to be on the webinar today, and thanks for the questions too.
Same here. Thanks everyone, and feel free to send us any questions about the research that we shared today. Look forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Sahir and Jill. Before I end the webinar, I'd like to reiterate the one main thing I think everyone should come out of here with. It's imperative for retailers and the manufacturers that sell their brands there to flip the in-store labor allocation. There's too much at stake. Increased competition, shoppers who demand a more engaged shopping experience, thinning profit margins. Your employees need to be focused on sales and customer service, and you need the most productive, efficient, and solution-oriented resources you can get to help. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. Thank you.